Today we are going to watch an amazing movie released in 2025 called Minecraft. It is basically a fantasy adventure movie. Well, what if we had a game world in our world where you could enter the game and create everything you want, and from there, gems, diamonds, money, everything could be brought to the real world? Then what would it be like? Today, I will tell you the story of a fun and interesting game. Today, a few useless people accidentally get into the game. Nothing was going well in their lives. Then, while trying to get the treasure from this game, they all get completely trapped in this game. There was no way for them to return to their world. And then, various types of death traps started coming step by step, in which you have to play the game and win. Otherwise, death is certain. But what happened to them in the end? Were they able to return to the real world from this game? That is what we will see in this movie. So let's take a look at the story of a strange and mysterious game world. So the story begins with a small child, who was very cute to look at. This child's name is Steve. Steve was a bit different from other children, because Steve liked to mine since childhood. And mining is digging the ground to find something. So Steve came to a construction site and was mining, but just then an old man came there. Steve ran away from there because children were not allowed to mine. Then, as you can see, many years passed. Steve is now a big man, but he still dresses up just like he did when he was a child. Steve is now working as an employee in a company, and today he had a presentation. To entertain everyone, he used to sing strange songs here and there during his presentation. This did not entertain anyone, but rather annoyed them. In other words, Steve's presentation failed. Although Steve is now working in a company, but his mind is still on mining. So when his office work was not going well at all, he decided to start mining again. So he went back to that place, where he came as a child. And this place was not allowed for young people. But now Steve has grown up. So the old man cannot tell Steve anything anymore. Steve then went straight into the mine. Steve got very excited about it, because his longtime dream is coming true today. Then, while Steve was digging the mine, he suddenly saw two cubes there, in which light was shining. Steph, unable to understand anything, puts the two cubes together. But by doing so, a portal opened there. Steph then entered the portal without thinking about anything, and he looked around him and saw that he had entered a different world through the portal. Steve couldn't believe his eyes, because this place was exactly like the world of his dreams. He was seeing such a beautiful place for the first time in his life. However, everything here was in the shape of boxes, which are basically called blocks. After that, Steve was looking at everything here with joy. However, after a while, he realized that whatever he wanted in his heart was being created automatically. Steve was very happy to see this. However, the world that Steve was in now was called the overworld. Now, after seeing everything here, Steve decided to come here and build a house for himself. And he would stay here from today, because he didn't like the boring life of the world at all. So at that time, a dog came to Steve. The dog was originally a kind of black dog. Steve then made the dog a bone and let it eat it. And the dog became his friend in a very short time. Steve also named this dog. He named him Danish. After that, Steve started playing with that dog. And he was there building all those buildings. Steve actually worked as a building designer in his company. However, he could not portray all the building designs that he had in his mind with his art or model. That is why he was building buildings here according to his mind's desire, which had been in his mind for so many years. In this way, Steve spent several days there. He also built various buildings and theme parks there. It was as if there were no more worries in his life. So one day, while wandering around, Steve saw another portal, but the portal was incomplete. So Steve built the rest of the portal. This opened up a new dimension. After Steve entered the portal, he found another new world, which was another world in the overworld. And this world was called the Nether. However, the Nether was completely different from the overworld. This place was surrounded by darkness, and there were a lot of peaks in the whole place. And just like the overworld, it was filled with happiness and peace. This Nether is the opposite. All the peaks living here are basically controlled by a queen, whose name is Maldosa. He was very angry. He wanted to keep Steve and Danish prisoner. But Steve didn't want it at all. That Danish would be imprisoned with him, because Danish was a very good dog, and he loved Steve very much. Steve then told Maldosa to keep him imprisoned, and to release Danish, but Maldosa did not listen to him. At that time, Maldosa saw the cube near Steve, which was basically opening the portals. He then took that cube, and he checked the cube and saw that it was the cube of the overworld. Maldosa understood that these two came from the overworld. This made Maldosa even more angry at them. Maldosa actually didn't like the overworld at all. Rather, he wanted to destroy the overworld completely. But we will find out why he wanted that later. Then, Maldosa then imprisoned Steve and Danish in a prison through his people. And he also left their portal cube, without which they would not be able to return to the overworld. However, at night, when everyone was asleep, Steve cleverly stolen the prison key from a guard and got out of the prison. Then he finally rescued the cube. And he gave that cube to Danish and told him that Danish should return to the overworld with the cube anyway. And there is another portal there, which is directly related to the real world. Steve then told Danish the address of his house, which is actually in the real world, because he wanted Danish to go there straight. And he hid the cube in his house so that Maldosa and his companions would never find the cube. Because if he could hide the cube, the portal to the overworld would never open again. And if the cube was in the real world, Maldosa would never find it. And he would never be able to destroy the overworld, although Danish didn't want to leave him. But Steve then forced him to go, because the overworld was his dream world. Moreover, he designed the overworld according to his mind. The overworld is a reflection of his entire life in his mind. Moreover, if he ran away with Danish, they might both get caught. That's why Steve stayed there. And Danish somehow ran out of that portal. Then he went straight to Steve's house. And he hid the two cubes. Here, with the two cubes being separated and the portal to the overworld closed forever. That is, as long as someone is connecting these cubes, then the overworld is completely safe. After that, it seems that quite a few years have passed. Here we see a person named Garrett. Garrett was always very cool and energetic. There was no sadness in his life. In fact, when he was younger, he was a video game champion. He created a video game and became very popular all over the world. He even received various awards for it. However, many years have passed since then. And now, all that is a memory for Garrett. Many years ago, Garrett opened a gaming shop to manage his life, where he used to operate the games he created. And once upon a time, all of these were very popular. His shop was always crowded with customers. No customers come to play his old model games anymore. Because of this, Garrett's business is suffering a huge loss. Today, Garrett even received a notice to close his shop. If he can't pay the money within a month, his gaming shop will be closed forever. Garrett is very worried. Hazida wanted to buy some things to decorate it all in a new way. However, since he didn't have much money, he went to an auction to buy containers. And these containers were a type of container that could hold a lot of things. But you never know what the container might contain when you buy it. Sometimes you can get a lot of good things for a little money. Sometimes you lose money. So Garrett mustered up the courage and went to a dealer. The dealer then told him about the most expensive container here and said that the container might have good things, but he was sure of one thing, that the container definitely contained a famous game called Cosmos. Garrett was very happy because he thought that if he managed this game in his shop, maybe customers would come to his shop again. Then he opened the container and saw the box of that game. When he quickly went and checked the game, he saw that it was only a game box and there were some small things inside the box. Garrett got very angry with the dealer, but the dealer then told him, "What's my fault? Did I go inside the box and see it?" This container had been opened, so now he had no way to get his money back here too. He had a big loss. Now the reverse of this container was to take him, but here we see that the Cosmos game box contained the cubes that Danish had hidden in Steve's house. But no one pays much attention to that. On the other hand, we see two children. Their names were Henry and Natalie. They were siblings. However, both of their parents died when they were very young. Now they were the only two of them. So today they are shifting to a new city, because Natalie got a job in a chips factory, and that factory has given them a place to live. So now they are going there. So after reaching that place, a salesperson from that factory receives them. Her name was Diana, and since they were both very young, she loves them both very much. Then Henry and Natalie moved to their new house, and together they started to tidy up the whole house. Actually, when Henry was very young, Natalie raised him with a lot of trouble because his parents died, and she loved her brother very much. So after coming to the new house, Henry felt very bored. So he went to buy something from a shop to entertain himself. And as soon as he went out on the street, his eyes fell on Garrett's shop. He then went straight inside the shop. In addition to playing games, Garrett's shop now has quite a few things. such as various small gadgets, books, and various interesting things for children. So Garrett was very happy to see a customer in his shop, and he gives Henry a paper and says that this is a paper for one of his courses. He is starting a course for kids like Henry, how to succeed in life through games. And in this course, he will charge $50 per hour. Henry is completely surprised to hear this. This guy doesn't have his own career, so how can he fix people's careers? Thinking about this, Henry comes to his school, and today was Henry's first day at school. So here, the class teacher puts a banana and an apple in front of them all, and asks them all to draw exactly such an apple and a banana. But Henry is quite surprised to see this, that such big students are allowed to draw these things. These are supposed to be drawn by children, although Henry was not very good at studying, but his knowledge of science and technology was very good. So Henry did not make a simple drawing here, but a very special and cutting-edge backpack, where there were different types of technology. Meanwhile, his classmates could not draw apples and bananas well. So when the teacher saw this drawing of Henry here, he was very impressed, and he praised Henry a lot. This made Henry's classmates very jealous of him. So at the end of the class, they all told Henry that anyone can do such a design. They would think Henry was really talented. If Henry could really make such a backpack and show it. Henry then said that none of this mattered to him. Everyone then challenged Henry to make a jack-o'-lantern. Henry also made a very beautiful jack-o'-lantern with the little things he had at hand. Everyone was amazed to see it. Then Henry wanted to show everyone his jack-o'-lantern. However, a boy got jealous and cut a wire from the jack-o'-lantern. That's why when Henry starts the jackpack, it runs very well. But later it loses control and it goes straight into the chips factory, where his sister Nellie has got a job, causing a lot of damage to the factory. When the school principal finds out about this, he calls Henry and tells Henry that if he doesn't bring his guardian to school, he will be expelled from school. However, Henry wants to tell his sister Natalie because Natalie will be very angry. So Henry, having no other choice, contacts Garrett. He then tells Garrett that he has an offer for Garrett. If Garrett comes to his school and plays his father in front of the principal, he will give Garrett $50 for this job. And Garrett needed money a lot now. So Garrett immediately got ready and went to Henry's school. And he went to talk to the principal. And this principal was actually a divorced woman. So when he saw a man, his style of talking changed completely. He started flirting with everyone. And the principal liked Garrett no matter who he saw. He didn't say anything about Henry anymore. Instead, he started talking to him about himself. This is how Henry's situation was somehow managed. Henry was quite happy with Garrett. Then, after finishing school, he came to Garrett's shop. And he got upset and started looking at various things. Garrett then wanted to know what happened to him. Henry then told him that he was a creative person. He had a talent for creating something new. But whenever he tried to bring out this talent, some trouble would arise. Hearing this, Garrett was comforting him. He had been a creative person like Henry when he was a child. Garrett was telling Henry stories of his success in life. And he was also listening to how his life had changed later. But just then, Henry caught sight of the cube, the one that Garrett had found inside the Cosmos game box. And this cube was still glowing. Henry also found a note with the cubes. The note said how to match the two cubes. Henry then matched the two cubes accordingly. As a result, a strange kind of reflection started there. And the cube started attracting him towards the mine. Inside the mine, the portal to the overworld was there. Henry unknowingly went near that portal, and Garrett followed him. On the other hand, Natalie was very worried about Henry. Because even though it was long since school was out, Henry was not returning home. Natalie had been looking for Henry in many places, but Henry is nowhere to be found. So Henry then asks Diana for help, because Diana has an acquaintance in this city. Diana then tracks Henry's location on her mobile phone and says that Henry is now near an abandoned mine in their city. Diana then takes Natalie and goes straight there. Meanwhile, Henry and Garrett have reached the portal through which Steve has gone to the overworld. This time, whenever Natalie and Diana come near Henry and Garrett, a very strong magnetic power is created in the cube near Henry, which pulls them all together and brings them inside the portal. As a result, they all come to the overworld without their knowledge. But none of them could understand what was happening and where they had arrived. Meanwhile, before Garrett could understand anything, Diana came and fell straight on top of him. Then they all started looking around the place, because they couldn't believe that such a place existed on Earth. and since the guide was a video game lover, this place seemed very familiar to him. He then told everyone that this place was like a game. He had played such a game. The name of the game was Minecraft, where everything was made of cubes. While talking about these things, a very cute sheep came in front of them. Gat then tried to talk to the fur. On the other hand, everyone else saw that there were various kinds of creatures here. There are even many buildings of different designs, as well as a very beautiful amusement park. And all of this was originally created by Steve. Meanwhile, while everyone was busy seeing all these things, a strange person from the overworld saw the portal there. Papper, not understanding anything, crossed the portal. As a result, he arrived directly on Earth. Meanwhile, Danish received the signal to open the portal. As a result, he ran to the overworld. On the other hand, Maldosa realized that the overworld portal had been opened again. So he was now looking for that cube, so that he could completely destroy the overworld. That is why he came straight to Steve. And he tells Steve that Steve will have to go to the overworld with his friends. And he will have to bring the 2 overworld cubes. Steph then agrees to Maldosa's words. He tells Maldosa that he will listen to everything he says. But just then Steph snatches one of Maldosa's swords, and he tries to escape from there. But Maldosa then lies to him. He says that he has kept his dog Danish captive. So Steve will be able to save Danish only when he gives him the 2 cubes. So Steph is forced to agree to Maldosa's words. Then Maldosa sends Steph to the overworld with his friends. But here a strange thing is that as soon as Maldosa's companions reached the overworld, their strength and size became much more terrifying. Meanwhile, Garrett and his companions did not understand what was happening here. But just then, Maldosa's companions started attacking them. They were trying to save them from them somehow. So when Henry and the rest were running from there, Henry hit a cube. As a result, the design of that place changed. Henry could realize it, that it was possible to modify the cubes here. So Henry was building very high walls with the cubes there through the creativity inside him, so that they could save from the picks sent by Maldosa. Meanwhile, Garrett saw an underground road there and fled there. Everyone was now able to hide in a safe place. But after a while, a huge creature came there, which was very strong, and that creature was going to attack Garrett. But Garrett somehow ran away from there, and Garrett had the overland cube in his hand. But those picks were constantly shooting fire arrows at him. And at one point, an arrow hit the cube. As a result, the cube fell to the ground, and the 2 cubes separated. This also closed the portal to return to Earth. Seeing this, Garrett was very scared. But still, Garrett picked up the cube again and went to the wall that Henry had built, where he was attacked by several pickaxes. Garrett then somehow fought them off and climbed over the wall, which Henry had made here. But then the picks came after him. The picks were going to attack them all. But then Steph came, and Steph was much stronger than all of them, so he started fighting the picks alone. And to fight, he was making various weapons from cubes. And he was fighting while having a lot of fun. But at one point, he stopped fighting, and he looked at the sky. Then it is seen that when the sunlight comes out, the picks burn in the sunlight and disappear, and Steve already knew that these picks can't stand sunlight, which is why they are in the nether, because the nether is always dark. Garrett thanks Steve for saving them all. Steve then says that he didn't come to save them, but to take those cubes back. But Natalie gets very angry after hearing Steve's words, and she tells Steve that they will never give him these cubes, because they will have to return to Earth through this cube. Garrett didn't want to give the cube here. Garrett tells Steve that he will make a lot of gold here. Then he will take them to Earth. He is in a lot of financial trouble in his life. With this, he will put his life back together. Steph laughs at him, and he tells them all that this is no longer possible, because last night, when the mole was stuck in the cube, the top part of the cube broke. That is, one of the 2 cubes broke, which was made of crystal. And without that, there is no way to open the portal to the world. Hearing this, they all get very scared, and they realize that they are stuck in the overworld. But Steve then tells them all to calm down. He says that there is another way to get out of here. That is to find the crystal of another cube. And for this, they all have to help Steph, so that Steph can protect his dog Danish from Maldosa. However, once he finds the crystal, Steph will send them all back to Earth. But in exchange, Steve will have to give him the cube. Everyone agrees with Steve. Then, on the other hand, we see Puppet, who came to Earth from the overworld. So, while he was walking on the road at night, he got into an accident with a car. However, it turns out that this car actually belonged to the principal of Henry's school. The principal then runs to Puppet. However, whenever he sees Puppet's face, he thinks that his face might have changed because of the accident with his car. This makes him very emotional, and he started flirting with Puppet here. He proposed to Puppet to have dinner with him, and he took her to have dinner with him. On the other hand, they needed many weapons to rescue Danish, because fighting Maldosa and his companions was not an easy task at all. So Steph then took them to a different creature world, where they could prepare for the fight against Maldosa. This creature world was a very rural environment. The creatures here were very calm. Steph was showing them all around the whole place because he made this wall. Now, Garrett says that they are very hungry. Steph then takes them all to a restaurant, and when they order food from a chicken, the chicken makes a dish with its own hands which is very hot. Steph couldn't eat it, but Garrett keeps eating the chicken to show himself strong. But after a while, his condition also gets worse. On the other hand, we see Maldosa. Maldosa realized that Steve was cheating on him. So he then informed his strongest pick. His name was Genghis. Maldosa asked Genghis and some of his companions to catch Steve's friends. However, they burn in the sunlight outside. So Maldosa then gives them a power. As a result, the sunlight will not harm them. On the other hand, Steph takes them all to a place where there were various things to make weapons. Garrett sees a kind of diamond there. Steve then tells him that this is not an ordinary diamond, because this diamond can be used to teleport to any place. And Garrett also checks it and is quite surprised. Then Steph asks them to use the various things here and make different weapons with their creativity. Garrett then says that it doesn't matter to him. Because of this, when he goes to make weapons, 2 very heavy iron buckets are made there, which makes Steve and Henry laugh. Then Henry says that he can make weapons, because he has a lot of creativity in him. Then Henry brings several things to one place, and he creates a simple song there, through which small blasts are being made. On the other hand, Genghis and his companions come to the creature world, where Steve and his companions were. As soon as they arrive here, they start destroying everything. So Steve, Garrett, and the rest of them came out, and they went out to face them with the weapon they had made. Garrett started rolling his buckets in front of them to scare Genghis. Genghis wasn't scared, but the bucket went straight to Steve. Steve then fell over. Then Henry and the rest of them started fighting with the picks. But Natalie didn't know anything about them. Still, she was trying to fight the picks with an axe. She could fight well. But on the other hand, Garrett couldn't do anything to the picks with that bucket. Meanwhile, Steve regained consciousness. Steve then told everyone to run away from here, because more picks will be sent here from the Nether. Steve and his entire team then split into 2 teams. Natalie and Diana go to one side. Steve, on the other hand, Garrett and Henry go to the other side. However, Natalie did not want to leave her brother. But now, this is what they have to do to survive. Meanwhile, Steve and his companions run to a very high place, from where there was no other way to escape. However, Steve had 2 special wings. He then put those wings on Henry and Garrett's backs. But since he did not have any wings, he rode straight on Garrett's back. And the 3 of them met and flew away from there. But on the other hand, Maldosa's picks were chasing them by parachute. And in the middle of the way, these picks were attacking them one by one. They were even trying to throw Steph down. Steph then started shouting that they had to reach Bluestone Mine anyway. Then these picks wouldn't be able to reach there, because Bluestone was a safe zone. So they all somehow reached Bluestone. As a result, the pigs couldn't see them anymore. Now, after coming here, Garrett and Henry asked Steve who Maldosa really was, and why he was after them. Steve then started telling them the story of Maldosa. Steve then told them that Maldosa was once an ordinary citizen of Nidar, and since childhood, her dream was to become a great dancer. That's why she always practiced dance, and she danced very well. Then once she participated in a talent show in Nether, where she performed very well. But because of her body shape, no one paid attention to her dance. Instead, everyone was there to body shaming her. Everyone laughed at her a lot. No one valued her creativity. This made Maldosa's father very angry with her, and he asked Maldosa to quit dancing. And that day Maldosa suffered a lot. So from that day on, she changed completely. She turned from a good person into a devil. She even acquired devilish power in herself and created a kingdom, where everyone is now afraid of him. Then Maldosa decides that he will destroy all the beautiful and creative things in the world. And that is precisely why he wants to destroy the overworld and make the overworld as dark as the Nether, where there will be no more happiness, peace, or creativity. On the other hand, we see the principal and Puppet. The principal has completely fallen in love with Puppet. So he invites Puppet to his house, and he wants to make him a dessert. On the other hand, we see Maldoza. Genghis returns to Maldoza with his entire tin, and he apologizes to Maldoza for not being able to keep his promise. But Maldoza is very angry. Then he brought his other powerful pick there. His name was the Great Hawk. He was also very strong. Maldoza killed Genghis here through the Great Hawk, because Maldoza can do anything once he gets angry. On the other hand, we can see Natalie and Diana. The two of them somehow got to the overworld. So Natalie was very worried, because she still doesn't know where her brother Henry is now. Natalie and Diana were looking for Steph, Henry, and Garrett around. But just then a black dog walked in front of them. Natalie was quite scared by this. However, Diana then gave the dog a bone to eat to pet it. This is how the dog became her friend in a very short time. But in a while, Diana can realize that the dog is none other than Danish, whom Steve is looking for, because she heard about Danish from Steve. So they no longer need to rescue Danish. Instead, they need to find the cube's crystal and return to Earth. So they go together to find Steve and the other two. On the other hand, we see Steve, Garrett, and Henry. Like Natalie, Henry was also very worried about his sister, whether she was okay. But Steve brought them to a cave in Bluestone, through which they can reach the crystal of that cube. Steve tells Garrett here that there is a lot of gold in front of the cave. If Garrett wants, he can take a lot of things from here. However, suddenly Garrett steps on a stone here. As a result, several springs come and start attacking it. Steph then tells that there are many kinds of traps here, so they have to proceed carefully. So then the three of them come to a place together, where there were many diamonds around. Garrett gets very excited when he sees these. However, Henry is getting very angry, because they need to find the crystal of the tube as soon as possible and return to Earth. Otherwise, any danger can happen here at any time. Without saying this, Great Hawk arrived there with his men. So the three of them boarded a container like a train to escape from them. But the container's speed gradually stopped. So Steph was forced to get down and push the container. And they were noticing something here. The faster the train was, the more the redstone was being activated. On the other hand, Great Hawk came right up to them. But at that moment, Garrett had an idea. He told Henry that they should increase the speed of the train with all the energy they had in their bodies, so that the entire redstone would be activated. Then the three of them did that together. The train runs so fast that the tunnel explodes as soon as all the redstones are activated. And they come out of the tunnel just a second before the blast. However, Great Hawk and his companions die in the tunnel. Then Steve, Henry, and Get come to Overland. Steve now tells them everything. He says that the crystal is in a place called Woodland. Woodland is a 3-story building with a huge building where there are terrible dangers because there are axes on the first floor, a kind of dead creature on the second floor, brain blasters whose job is to explode heads, and on the third floor, the Emerald Man whose eyes hypnotize the brain when you look at them, meaning the brain stops working. But now that they have overcome all this danger, how will they get the crystal? Garrett knows that he has an idea. They will sing and dance with some musical instruments to attract the attention of those creatures. In this way, when everyone's attention is on them, Henry will take the opportunity to get the crystal. Then they start working according to this plan. They go straight to Woodland. There Garrett and Steve sing like Joker. Meanwhile, Henry takes this opportunity to go get the crystal. Although at first, all the creatures there paid attention to them. But after a while, they realize that they are not really artists, but rather they want to trap them, so they punish them by putting them in a ring to fight with some of their special creatures. Garrett shows a lot of courage at first because he was asked to fight with a very small creature. So he thought that losing it would not be a problem. But this small creature had a lot of power, so he made Garrett's condition worse by beating him. And just when he was about to blow Garrett's head off, Steve ran in and hit the creature with his head. As a result, Garrett survived like this. On the other hand, we see Henry. Henry somehow reached the 3rd floor, because everyone was busy watching the fight at that time. So Henry easily found the crystal. But just then, the Immortal Man came there. And whenever Henry made a mistake and looked into his eyes, he saw the people around him. Everyone was talking nonsense about him, that he was useless, that his sister was saying that he was the worst brother in the world. But since Henry was very intelligent, he immediately remembered that looking into the eyes of a Maltman hypnotized people, so he controlled himself, picked up an axe and killed a Maltman there. This was the first time anyone had ever killed a Multman, so that a Multman turned into a diamond. It was a special kind of diamond that could teleport people to any place. Then Henry immediately teleported to Steve's place. Then the three of them tried to escape from there with the crystal. But just then Maldosa came there with his companions. At that time, Garrett told Henry and Steph that he was attracting all of their attention from here. They should take this opportunity to escape from here, because no matter what, the crystal would save them. For this, Henry and Steph somehow got on one of Maldosa's parachutes, and they started to escape from there. On the other hand, Garrett was also escaping from there. But just then, a huge explosion occurred there, which Maldosa did. Henry, Garrett, and Steph became unconscious, and Maldosa also left from there. Then when the three of them regained consciousness, they found themselves in a room actually. Danish had rescued them all because Danish knew the smell of Steve's body, so he brought Diana and Natalie to them, and Steve was very happy to see Danish here. But when they became unconscious, Maldosa took the cube and the crystal of the cube from them, where both of the overworld and the earth are there, but Maldosa then created a new portal between the overworld and the earth through that cube and crystal. This turned the overworld into darkness. And Maldosa did this so he and his entire team could get to the overworld, because most of his team creatures would die in sunlight, and he gave his power to withstand sunlight to Genghis. Meanwhile, Steve and his entire team realize that Maldosa is going to attack them with his companions. Here, an idea comes to Steve's head. Steph then tells everyone that they all have to prepare to fight Maldosa now, and since everything can be created with their own creativity in Overland, they all have to create different weapons in their own way. Here, they all plan together to create different types of powerful weapons and plan how they will attack Maldosa and his team. Henry had ideas for different types of weapons in his head, so he also created several designs here. They even created an army of iron golems. They were very powerful. After a while, it is seen that Maldosa comes to the overworld with his entire team. The Steves then send their golem army in front of them. However, Maldosa laughs at this, because he knows that the golem armies are nothing to his team. After a while, the fight starts. It turns out that Steve and his team had created the golem armies in such a way that they had a kind of spring in their bodies. So, a golem was defeating some of Maldosa's team members. Seeing this, Maldosa asked his strongest team member to fight, whose name was the Great Hog. The Great Hog didn't actually die when he fell down the tunnel that day. So when the Great Hog came here to fight, he was confronted by Ultra Golem, who was the most powerful golem. On the other hand, Steve had specially created a suit to fight and a very powerful sword, which was made of very strong metal armor. So Steve then went straight to attack Maldosa. But Maldosa's black magic was no match for their power. And Henry was fighting here by teleporting using that diamond, which he got from Woodland. Then when Henry went to attack them from the highest point there, a very big ball from a long distance hit him. Henry was about to fall down and die. But just then, Garrett came there with a parachute, and he somehow saved Henry. Garrett actually used his water bucket intelligence to create a special gas balloon. Then, he started to attack through that gas balloon into that portal, because of which the overworld became dark. So, after a while, the portal was completely destroyed due to the continuous attack. As a result, the sun rose again in the overworld. As a result, almost everyone on the Maldo team was burned by the sunlight. Maldosa's power was completely reduced. So Maldosa tried to attack Steve several times but failed. Meanwhile, even though Steve now had the power to kill Maldosa, Steve told Maldosa that he was not as ruthless as he was, so he would not do anything to him. Saying this, Steve left from there, and this also made Maldosa's head hang low in shame. Maldosa then admitted defeat and returned to the Nether forever. As a result, Steve and his team won. Now, according to Steve's words, arrangements would have to be made to send the guides to Earth. So Steve then opened a portal to the world for them. But when they were all leaving Steve became very emotional, and Steve then told Garrett that he had no friends here at his age. So it would have been much better if Garrett was here with him. But Garrett then told him that any place is the most perfect place in the world for people. And I think it is the most perfect place in the world for you. If you can do everything you do in the overworld with your creativity in the real world, your life will be much more beautiful than here. And we are all your friends now. Whenever you want, you can come back to the world and come to my shop. With that, they all say goodbye one by one and leave. Steve stood there for a long time, thinking about what to do, and then he realized that his friends in the overworld were the most valuable to him. So he followed them to Earth. After this incident, a few months passed. Here we see Garage Steve and his entire team. After returning to Earth, they created a new gaming zone inside Guy's shop. And they named this gaming zone Overworld. And in this gaming zone, they created a digital game called Block City. They created the game using the ideas of the tasks they completed to survive in the overworld. As a result, the game became popular everywhere in a very short time. So now there was no shortage of customers in Garrett's shop. Meanwhile, since Steve loved to sing, he would now entertain everyone in Garrett's shop by singing. And now they had no shortage of money. So Natalie quit her job and started doing her hobby. Garrett now takes care of them all. And Henry now goes to school with a backpack he made with his own hands. In other words, after coming from the overworld, their lives have completely changed. Everyone's life is filled with laughter and fun. On the other hand, we see the principal of Henry's school. He has married that puppet, and that puppet also loves him very much now. They even start teaching each other the languages of their worlds. And with such a beautiful ending, the story ends here.